Welcome to my channel. Please like this video and subscribe. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's dive in. Ryland Grady leaned back in his ergonomic chair, his fingers rapidly typing as he finished his latest consulting report. The San Francisco skyline stretched beyond his office window, a symbol of the tech empire he had helped to build over the past 10 years. At 35, he was at the peak of his career, a self-made millionaire whose sharp intellect and tireless work ethic had propelled him from modest beginnings to the top of Silicon Valley. As he clicked send on the email to his most recent Fortune 500 client, Ryland allowed himself a satisfied smile. Another seven-figure payday secured. But looking at him, you'd never guess it. His casual button-down shirt and jeans contrasted sharply with the designer suits favored by many of his peers. The old Ford pickup in the parking garage stood out against the sea of Teslas and BMWs, just the way Ryland liked it. He had learned the value of humility and modesty from his mother back in Boise. The image of her weary face after yet another double shift was forever etched in his memory. They never had much, but she gave him everything he needed to succeed. "You don't need to show off to prove your worth, Rye," she'd always remind him. "Let your actions speak for themselves." It was advice he held close to his heart, even as his bank balance swelled to staggering amounts. After all, what good was flaunting wealth when it couldn't buy the things that truly mattered? The ping of his phone interrupted his thoughts. A text from Kim. "Dinner at the Andersons tonight. Don't forget." Ryland sighed, feeling a bit of tension creep into his shoulders. These dinners with Kim's friends always left him exhausted. He much preferred quiet evenings at home with his wife, but she had been pushing for more couples time lately, likely in another attempt to steer him toward a more luxurious lifestyle. As he packed up his laptop, Ryland's mind wandered back to the early days of their relationship. Kim had been a breath of fresh air, lively, driven, with a zest for life that had pulled him out of his work-focused bubble. The memory of her joy when he proposed still brought warmth to his chest. But lately that joy seemed to have dimmed, replaced by a restlessness he couldn't quite put his finger on. The drive home was quicker than usual, the normally heavy Silicon Valley traffic surprisingly light. As Ryland pulled into the driveway of their modest suburban home, he spotted Kim through the window, pacing as she talked on her phone. Even from a distance, he could see the tension in her movements. He barely made it through the front door before Kim confronted him, her manicured nails tapping impatiently against her phone case. "There you are." "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten," she said sharply. Ryland raised an eyebrow. "I'm home an hour early, Kim." She waved her hand dismissively. "We need to leave in 30 minutes if we want to be on time." "The Andersons just moved into that new place in Los Altos Hills, remember?" "Right," Ryland replied, trying to keep the fatigue from his voice. "Let me grab a quick shower and change." Kim's eyes narrowed as she looked him over, taking in his worn jeans and scuffed boots. "Please don't tell me you're wearing that flannel shirt again. This is an important dinner. Reed just made partner at his law firm, and we need to make a good impression." Ryland swallowed the retort that came to mind. There was no point in reminding her that his casual wardrobe hadn't stopped him from landing million-dollar deals. Instead, he nodded and headed for the stairs. "Oh, and honey," Kim called after him, "maybe we could take my car tonight. The truck kind of stands out in that neighborhood." Ryland felt his jaw tighten but forced himself to say sure before disappearing into their bedroom. And as the hot water from the shower beat against his back, he tried to wash away the frustration. Kim meant well. She only wanted what was best for them, even if her version of best sometimes felt overwhelming. 25 minutes later, they were driving down the 280 in Kim's sleek Audi, bought with Ryland's money but registered in her name. He had to admit the leather seats were far more comfortable than the worn ones in his truck. Kim chattered on about the latest neighborhood gossip, filling him in on who was feuding with whom and which couples were on the brink of divorce. Ryland made the right sounds of interest, but his mind was already dreading the inevitable small talk ahead. The Andersons' new home was just as over the top as Ryland had expected, a sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion perched on a hill, complete with manicured gardens and a fountain in the circular driveway. He could practically feel Kim's envy radiating beside him. "Can you believe this place?" she whispered excitedly as they approached the ornate front door. "Jason said they got it for a steal at only $8 million. Imagine living here." Ryland chose not to mention that he could easily afford the house several times over. Instead, he put on a polite smile as the door opened to reveal their hosts. "Kim." Ryland, so glad you could make it, Melissa Anderson gushed, air-kissing both of them. The scent of her expensive perfume lingered as she moved past. Behind her stood her husband Jason, all smiles and California tan. Come in, Melissa urged them. Dinner's almost ready, but Jason was just about to give everyone the grand tour. You have to see the wine cellar, it's amazing. The next hour passed in a blur of high ceilings, marble countertops, and artisanal decor. Ryland nodded and smiled at the right moments, but he couldn't ignore the way Kim's eyes lit up with each new luxury they encountered. The longing in her gaze was unmistakable. Finally, they gathered around a massive dining table that likely cost more than some people's annual salaries. Conversation flowed easily, aided by the numerous bottles of wine Jason eagerly showcased. "So Ryland," Jason said between bites of Wagyu beef, "Kim tells me you're in tech consulting. How's business these days?" Ryland shrugged, keeping his tone humble. "No complaints, there's plenty of work in the valley." I bet Jason laughed, "But I imagine the real money is in starting your own company. Ever thought about transitioning from consultant to founder?" Before Ryland could respond, Kim jumped in. "Oh, Ryland's not really the entrepreneurial type. He likes the security of consulting." There was something in her voice, disappointment? Embarrassment? "Nothing wrong with that," Jason said smoothly, though Ryland sensed the condescension behind his smile. As the conversation moved on, Ryland found himself retreating inward. He watched as Kim laughed a little too loudly at Jason's jokes, her eyes sparkling in a way they hadn't around him in months. When Melissa began talking about their upcoming trip to the Maldives, Ryland couldn't miss the open envy on his wife's face. It was close to midnight when they finally said their goodbyes. The drive home was quiet, with a tension humming between them like a live wire. "They seem happy," Kim said at last, her voice carefully measured. Ryland grunted in response. "Did you see that kitchen? I bet Melissa loves cooking in there. Remember when we talked about redoing ours?" "Our kitchen works just fine," Ryland replied, perhaps a little more sharply than he meant to. Kim's lips tightened into a thin line. "I'm not saying it doesn't, but wouldn't it be nice to have something a bit more modern? We've been in this house for 5 years now. Don't you think it's time for an upgrade?" Ryland's hands gripped the steering wheel. "We don't need an upgrade, Kim. We have everything we need," Kim murmured under her breath. "But what about want? Don't you ever want more than just getting by?" The words stung Ryland like a slap. Getting by, they lived in a $1.5 million house in one of the most expensive markets in the country. Kim drove a luxury car and owned a closet full of designer clothes. How could she possibly think they were merely getting by? But of course she didn't know the full extent of their wealth. Ryland had always kept his finances private, not wanting money to shift the balance of their relationship. Now he was beginning to wonder if that had been a mistake. The rest of the drive passed in strained silence. By the time they pulled into the garage, Ryland's patience was hanging by a thread. "I'm going to bed," he announced as soon as they were inside. "Early meeting tomorrow." Kim's face fell. "Already?" "I thought maybe we could talk about not tonight." Ryland cut her off, already heading up the stairs. "I'm exhausted." He felt a pang of guilt at the hurt on her face, but shoved it aside. He needed time to think, to figure out how they had drifted so far apart without him even noticing. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Ryland tossed and turned, Kim's words echoing in his head. When he finally did drift off, his dreams were a jumbled mess of dollar signs and disappointed faces. The next few weeks were a blur of work and awkward conversations. Ryland buried himself in his consulting work, taking on even more clients as a distraction from the growing rift between him and Kim. She, in turn, seemed to be spending more time with her real estate colleagues, coming home later each night with forced smiles and vague explanations. The tension came to a head one quiet Sunday evening. They were eating takeout, neither of them having felt like cooking. The TV droned softly in the background, filling the silence that had become too familiar. "So," Kim said, pushing her lo mein around her plate, "Stacy's having a little get-together next weekend. Just a casual thing with some of the girls from the office. You don't mind if I go, do you?" Ryland shrugged. "Why would I mind?" "You don't need my permission." She winced at his tone. "I know that. I don't want you to feel like I'm avoiding you or anything." "Are you?" The question slipped out before Ryland could stop himself. Kim's eyes widened. "What? No, of course not. Why would you even think that?" Ryland set down his chopsticks, suddenly losing his appetite. Come on, Kim. We've barely spoken in weeks. Every time I come home, you're either out or on your way out. What am I supposed to think? I've been busy with work, she replied defensively. You know how it is. The market's been crazy lately, right? Ryland said, his voice flat. Because you've been so successful closing deals, the moment the words left his mouth, he regretted them. Kim recoiled as if he had physically struck her, hurt and anger flashing in her eyes. What's that supposed to mean? She demanded. Ryland ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Nothing. Forget I said anything. No, Kim pressed. I want to know what you meant by that. Do you think I'm not working hard enough? That I'm just pretending to have a career? That's not what I said, Ryland protested. But Kim was on a roll. You know what? Not all of us can be big-shot consultants making six figures. Some of us are still trying to build something for ourselves. But I guess that's not good enough for you, is it? Ryland felt his own temper rising. When have I ever said that, Kim? When have I ever made you feel like what you do isn't enough? You don't have to say it, Kim shot back. It's in every disapproving look when I talk about work. Every time you brush off my ideas for improving our life. God forbid we actually enjoy the money you make instead of living like we're still struggling college students. There's nothing wrong with living within our means, Ryland replied tightly. Just because we don't flaunt every dollar doesn't mean we're struggling. Kim let out a bitter laugh. Our means? Ryland, we live in a nice house in a good neighborhood, and that's great. But you act like spending money on anything beyond the basics is some kind of moral failure. Would it kill you to want more? To enjoy life a little? I do enjoy life, Ryland insisted. I enjoy our life. At least I thought I did. But apparently that's not enough for you anymore. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Kim's face crumpled, her eyes filling with tears. You know what? Maybe it's not, she whispered. Maybe we want different things. Maybe we're not as compatible as we thought. Ryland felt like the ground had dropped out from under him. What are you saying, Kim? She stood, wrapping her arms around herself. I'm saying I don't know. I need time to think, to figure out what I really want. Kim Ryland started, but she was already heading toward the door. I'm going to stay with Stacy for a few days, she said without meeting his eyes. I think we both need some space to figure things out. Before Ryland could even process what was happening, she was gone. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the now empty house. He sat there for a long time, staring at the half-eaten takeout, wondering how they had ended up here. Part of him wanted to run after Kim, to tell her everything about his real income, about the millions stashed in offshore accounts. But another part, the part that remembered his mother's lessons on the true value of things, held him back. If money was all it took to make Kim happy, to make her stay, was that really a marriage worth saving? The next few days passed in a fog. Ryland went through the motions at work, his usual sharp focus dulled by the constant replay of their argument in his mind. He found himself reaching for his phone multiple times a day, composing messages to Kim only to delete them. On the fourth day, he came home to find Kim standing in the doorway with a small suitcase by her feet. His heart leapt, hoping she had changed her mind, but the hard expression on her face told a different story. We need to talk, she said, and Ryland felt his world crumble. What followed was perhaps the most surreal conversation of Ryland's life. Kim, her voice swinging between anger and tears, laid out all her frustrations. She spoke of feeling trapped in their modest way of living, how she'd watched her friends climb the career ladder and improve their lives while she remained stuck. She confessed that she had come to resent what she saw as Ryland's lack of drive. I can't do this anymore, Ry, she said at last. I thought I could be content with a simple life, but I'm not. I want more. I deserve more. Ryland sat there, stunned, as a whirlwind of emotions swirled inside him: hurt, anger, disbelief, and beneath it all, a hardening resolve. So that's it, he said when she finished. You're leaving after 5 years of marriage because I don't make enough for you. Kim flinched. It's not just about the money, she replied. It's about feeling like we're moving forward, like we're building something together, but you're happy just to exist. I need more than that. Ryland nodded slowly, a plan beginning to take shape in his mind. I see. So you think you'll find that more out there somewhere? Kim didn't meet his gaze. I have to try, she murmured. I'm still young. I have time to start fresh, to find someone who shares my goals. Someone richer, you mean? Ryland stated flatly. Kim's silence was all the confirmation he needed. All right, he said, surprising himself with how calm he sounded. If that's what you want, I won't stop you. We'll have a quick, clean divorce, no drama." Kim looked up, startled. "You're not going to fight this?" Ryland shook his head, his voice steady. "What's the point? You've made it clear what you want, and it's not me, unless I suddenly become some flashy millionaire overnight." He noticed a flicker of regret in Kim's eyes, quickly replaced by determination. She squared her shoulders. "I'll have my lawyer draft the papers. We can do this peacefully." "Right, of course," Ryland replied, his tone neutral. "I'll have Carla handle my side. She'll make sure everything is fair." Kim's eyebrows rose slightly at the mention of Ryland's well-connected lawyer friend, but she said nothing. Instead, she picked up her suitcase, pausing briefly. "I'm sorry, Ry," she said quietly. "I do love you." "Just not enough," Ryland finished for her. "I get it. Go on, your new life is waiting." As the door closed behind her, Ryland exhaled a long, slow breath. He walked to the window, watching as Kim's car disappeared down the driveway for the last time. A mixture of emotions churned inside him: anger, sadness, a touch of relief, and most of all, a newfound determination. He pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Carla, it's Ryland. I need your help with something. How quickly can you process a divorce?" The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and brief meetings. True to his word, Ryland kept things amicable, agreeing to a modest settlement that would not reveal the full extent of his wealth. Kim, eager to move on with her new life, didn't push for more. During one of these meetings, Ryland overheard Kim talking quietly with her friend Stacy in the corner of the lawyer's office. "I'm telling you, Kim, this guy's perfect," Stacy was saying. "Nate Cole, he's got money, style, everything you've been wanting. And he's been asking about you." Ryland turned away, his jaw clenching. So Kim had already set her sights on someone new. He shouldn't have been surprised, but the speed of it still stung. On the day their divorce was finalized, Ryland found himself alone in the house they had once shared. He wandered from room to room, memories pressing in from all sides. In the kitchen he stopped, recalling Kim's complaints about wanting to remodel. Suddenly energized, he grabbed a notepad and began sketching out plans for a complete renovation. Why not? It was his house now, and he could do whatever he wanted with it. As he worked, Ryland felt a weight lift off his shoulders. For years he had been holding back, maintaining an image of modest success to keep Kim grounded. Now he was free to enjoy the fruits of his labor without guilt or explanation. His phone buzzed with a text from Carla. "It's done." "You're officially a free man," Ryland smiled, a plan crystallizing in his mind. He would give Kim exactly what she had wanted, a glimpse of the lifestyle she had been craving. But by the time she realized what she had thrown away, it would be far too late. He opened his laptop and began firing off emails to his financial advisors. It was time to start making some highly visible investments. Let the rumors circulate about the suddenly successful Ryland Grady. He'd make sure those whispers reached Kim's ears, but always secondhand, always just out of her reach. As night fell, Ryland stood by his window, looking out over the Silicon Valley skyline. He raised a glass of whiskey in a silent toast to new beginnings, sweet revenge, and the lesson Kim was about to learn the hard way: be careful what you wish for. Little did Ryland know the wheels of fate were already turning. Across town, Kim was on her first date with Nate Cole, dazzled by his charm and apparent wealth. She had no idea she was stepping into a house of cards, or that a storm was brewing on the horizon. Ryland's phone buzzed again, a news alert about a rising star in the tech world. It was him. He smiled, a cold, determined gleam in his eye. The game had officially begun. Weeks had gone by since the divorce, and Ryland was settling into his new routine. His days were filled with work, and his evenings were spent enjoying the quiet satisfaction of finally living life on his own terms. The kitchen renovation was well underway, and he had started making strategic appearances at high-profile tech events, carefully cultivating his new public image. One crisp morning, Ryland was enjoying his coffee on the patio when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his brow furrowing at the unfamiliar number. Curiosity got the best of him. "Ryland Grady speaking," he answered, his voice neutral. Ryland, the voice on the other end, was shaky and unsure. It took Ryland a moment to recognize the voice. "Kim," he worked to keep the surprise out of his tone. "What do you want?" Can we talk?" "Please, I need to see you." Her voice was thick with desperation, and Ryland's first impulse was to hang up. But a cold curiosity crept in. This might be worth hearing. Fine, he said flatly. The cafe on 3rd Street. 1 hour. He arrived early, choosing a table where he could easily watch the entrance. Right on time, Kim walked in, and Ryland had to stifle a gasp. She looked awful. Her hair was unkempt, dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her designer clothes were wrinkled and disheveled. This wasn't the polished, driven woman who had left him behind. Kim slid into the seat across from him, her hands nervously playing with her purse. "Thank you for meeting me," she said softly. Ryland leaned back, his face unreadable. "What do you want, Kim?" She took a deep breath. I made a huge mistake. Everything's falling apart. Nate, he's not who I thought he was. We're drowning in debt, and I miss the stability we had. I miss you." Ryland's eyebrows shot up. "Stability? That's ironic coming from you. Wasn't our life too boring and modest for your taste?" Kim winced. I know, I was foolish. I thought I wanted all that flash and excitement, but now she trailed off, looking lost. "Now what?" Ryland asked, his voice taking on an edge. "You thought you'd come crawling back and I'd welcome you with open arms." "No, I hoped. God, I don't know what I hoped." Tears filled her eyes. "I just know I made the biggest mistake of my life by walking away from you." Ryland studied her in silence. A part of him, one he wasn't proud of, enjoyed seeing her so broken, but mostly he felt nothing. The woman sitting before him was a stranger, someone he no longer cared to know. "Kim," he said slowly, "I make $1.5 million a year." The color drained from Kim's face. "What? No, that's impossible. You never." "I didn't think it mattered." Ryland cut her off, his voice cold. "You left without ever really knowing me, Kim. Without ever caring to look deeper." Kim's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked as though she'd been slapped. But why didn't you ever say anything? Why did we live so modestly?" Ryland let out a humorless laugh. "Because, Kim, money isn't everything. I thought you understood that once. Clearly, I was wrong." "We can fix this, can't we?" Kim leaned forward, her voice trembling. "I was wrong, so wrong. I just didn't know. Please, give me another chance." Ryland looked at her closely, taking in the desperation and regret, and yet he felt nothing, no anger, no satisfaction, just a deep weariness. "You've already made your choice, Kim," he said quietly. "I'm not a backup plan, and I'm certainly not a fool." Before she could respond, a man's voice interrupted. "Kim, what's going on here?" Ryland glanced up to see a tall, well-dressed man approaching their table. Even without an introduction, Ryland knew this had to be Nate Cole. The flashy watch and two perfect smiles screamed new money and bad decisions. Kim's eyes widened in panic. "Nate, this isn't. We were just—" Ryland stood, grabbing his coat. "I'll let you two sort it out," he said calmly. He turned to Nate with a bland smile. "Good luck, you're going to need it." As Ryland walked away, he heard Kim's frantic explanations and Nate's increasingly angry replies. He didn't look back. The encounter left Ryland feeling unexpectedly energized. He threw himself into his work with renewed focus, taking on high-profile clients and making waves in the tech industry. His name started appearing in industry publications, and whispers of his growing success spread through Silicon Valley like wildfire. It was at one of these tech events that he met Chloe Adams. She was giving a talk on innovative software development techniques, and Ryland found himself captivated not just by her ideas, but by her down-to-earth approach. After her presentation, he approached her at the networking event. "Impressive presentation," he said, offering his hand. "Ryland Grady." Chloe's handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "Chloe Adams." "Thanks. I was worried I'd put everyone to sleep with all that technical talk." Ryland chuckled. "Far from it. Your ideas on agile development are fascinating. I'd love to hear more about how you're applying them in real-world projects." They fell into an easy conversation, discussing industry trends and swapping stories. Ryland was surprised at how much he enjoyed their talk. He hadn't connected with someone on an intellectual level like this in a long time. As the evening wound down, Ryland found himself reluctant to say goodbye. "Listen," he said, I know this might be a bit forward, but would you be interested in grabbing coffee sometime? I'd love to continue our conversation in a more relaxed setting. Chloe tilted her head, considering. You know what? I'd like that. But just so you know, I'm not interested in climbing corporate ladders or chasing after the next big thing. If that's what you're after, I'll save us both the trouble. Ryland smiled, a genuine one this time. Chloe, that might be the most refreshing thing I've heard all year. Their coffee date turned into dinner, which led to long walks filled with conversations about everything from coding philosophies to favorite books. Ryland found himself opening up in ways he never had, with Kim sharing his upbringing, his mother's influence, and his real thoughts on wealth and success. In turn, Chloe shared her passion for coding and her desire to make a real difference through technology. She was brilliant, kind, and refreshingly unimpressed by wealth. Weeks turned into months, and Ryland realized he was happier than he'd been in years. He and Chloe complemented each other perfectly, challenging and supporting one another equally. One lazy Sunday morning, as they lounged on Ryland's patio over breakfast, Chloe broached a topic they'd been skirting for weeks. So she said, setting down her coffee, "Are we ever going to talk about the elephant in the room?" Ryland raised an eyebrow. Which elephant would that be? Chloe rolled her eyes with a smile. The one where you're clearly some kind of secret millionaire, but you live like a normal person. Don't get me wrong, I love that about you, but I'm curious, what's the story? Ryland was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Then he slowly told her everything: his childhood, his marriage to Kim, and his decision to keep his wealth private. When he finished, Chloe reached across the table and took his hand. "Thank you for trusting me with that," she said softly. "That couldn't have been easy to share." Ryland squeezed her hand gently. "Oddly enough, it was. That's how I know this. Us, it's different. It's real." Chloe grinned mischievously, a playful gleam in her eye. "Well, in that case, I have a confession to make." To Ryland's heart skipped a beat. "Oh!" "I've secretly been hoping you'd offer to fund my startup idea," she said with a serious face, then burst into laughter at the shocked expression on Ryland's face. "I'm kidding. Oh my God, your face." Ryland joined her in laughter, feeling lighter than he had in years. This, he realized, was what had been missing in his life: not just a companion, but an equal, someone who saw him for who he truly was, not for what he had. As their laughter quieted, Chloe's face became more thoughtful. "You know, kidding aside, I do have some ideas for socially responsible tech initiatives. I'm not looking for a handout, but if you ever want to collaborate." Ryland grinned. "I'd love to hear about them." "Partners?" He held out his hand. Chloe shook it, her smile bright. "Partners." Meanwhile, across town, Kim's life was spiraling out of control. The cracks in Nate's perfect facade had grown into gaping holes, and Kim found herself trapped in a nightmare she had helped create. It started with small things: bills arriving with final notice. Stamped on them, hushed phone calls that abruptly ended when she walked in, but soon, the reality became impossible to ignore. "What do you mean the business is failing?" Kim's voice echoed through their penthouse. "You told me everything was fine." Nate paced the room, running his hands through his hair. "I thought we could turn it around. The investors were supposed to come through, but now." "Now what?" Kim demanded. Nate slumped in defeat. "Now we're broke. Worse than broke, we're buried in debt." Kim felt the world spin. This couldn't be happening again. "But what about the cars, the apartment, our lifestyle?" "All smoke and mirrors," Nate said bitterly. "The cars are borrowed, the money is gone. I thought if we looked successful, we'd become successful. Fake it till you make it, right?" Kim collapsed onto the couch, her head in her hands. "Oh God, what have I done?" As the days passed, things went from bad to worse. The penthouse was repossessed, the cars were taken, and they moved into a small apartment in a neighborhood Kim had once looked down upon. She tried reaching out to her old friends, but news of their downfall had spread fast. The doors that had once been open to her were now closed. Even Stacy, the one who had introduced her to Nate, wasn't returning her calls. Desperate, Kim attempted to restart her real estate career, but her reputation was ruined, and no one was willing to give her a chance. One night, after yet another day of failed job hunting, Kim stared at her phone. Ryland's number glowed on the screen, a beacon of hope in her collapsing world. Her finger hovered over the call button. "Don't even think about it," Nate's voice startled her. He stood in the doorway, his eyes hard. "You made your choice. You're with me now, for better or worse." Kim looked at him, really looked at him. Gone was the confident, charming man she thought she had married. In his place was a bitter, angry stranger. "Is this really what you want?" she asked softly. Nate's laugh was harsh. "What we want doesn't matter anymore. This is what we've got, Kim. Get used to it." As Nate stormed out of the room, Kim turned back to her phone. With trembling fingers, she pressed call. It went straight to voicemail. "You've reached Ryland Grady. I'm unavailable to take your call. If this is a business matter, please contact my assistant. If this is personal, well, you probably shouldn't have this number." Kim's breath caught in her throat. Even his voicemail sounded different, confident, successful, everything she thought she wanted. "Ryland," she whispered into the phone. "I'm sorry. I was wrong about everything. Please call me back. I need help." She ended the call, tears streaming down her face. But deep down, she knew there would be no rescue, no second chance. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. Across town, Ryland's phone buzzed with a missed call notification. He glanced at the screen, saw Kim's name, and without hesitation pressed block number. "Everything okay?" Chloe asked, looking up from her laptop where she was working on their latest project. Ryland smiled, a genuine smile of contentment. "Yeah," he said, "everything's perfect." But as he turned back to their work, Ryland felt the last remnants of his old life fall away. The future stretched out ahead of him, bright with possibility, and for the first time in years he was excited to see where it would lead. Ryland sat in his home office, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he wrapped up his latest project. The warm glow of success surrounded him, a stark contrast to the turmoil happening elsewhere in Silicon Valley. A knock at the door interrupted his concentration. Chloe poked her head in, a concerned look on her face. "Ah, have you seen the news?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Ryland leaned back, stretching. "No, I've been buried in work all morning." "What's up?" Chloe walked in, holding a tablet. "It's about Nate Cole. You know, Kim's new husband? His company just filed for bankruptcy. It's all over the tech blogs." A cold smile tugged at the corners of Ryland's mouth. "Is that so? How unfortunate for him." Chloe studied him closely. "Ryland, you didn't have anything to do with this, did you?" Ryland met her gaze steadily. "Let's just say I made some strategic business decisions. If those decisions happen to affect Mr. Cole's company, well, that's just business, isn't it?" "Ryland," Chloe said, her tone a mix of admiration and concern, "what exactly did you do?" Ryland stood and walked to the window, looking out over the San Francisco skyline. "I may have used some connections to make sure Cole's company was blacklisted from key financial networks. It made it nearly impossible for him to get the funding he needed to keep his operation afloat." Chloe's eyes widened. "That's ruthless." Ryland turned to face her, his expression hard. "It's business, Chloe. Cole was running a scam, preying on people's desire for a flashy lifestyle. He just picked the wrong target this time. And it has nothing to do with the fact that he married your ex-wife," Chloe pressed. Ryland's laugh was cold. "Oh, it has everything to do with that. I won't pretend otherwise. Kim made her choice, and now they both have to live with the consequences." Chloe was silent for a moment, processing his words. Then she nodded slowly. "I get it. I don't know if I agree with it, but I understand. Just be careful, okay? Don't let this consume you." Ryland's expression softened as he looked at her. "I won't. This is the end of it, I promise. From here on out, it's all about our future." Across town, the fallout from Nate's business collapse was reaching its peak. Kim paced their small apartment, phone pressed to her ear. "What do you mean there's nothing left?" she hissed into the receiver. "There has to be something." Nate's voice crackled through the phone, defeated and angry. "It's gone, Kim. All of it, the business, our savings, everything. We're wiped out." Kim felt the room spin. She collapsed onto the threadbare couch, clutching her hair. How could this happen? You promised me. You said we'd be set for life. I thought we would be, Nate shouted back. But someone's been working against us, cutting off every move, every lifeline. It's like they knew exactly how to destroy us. A chill ran down Kim's spine as she remembered her last conversation with Ryland, the cold look in his eyes when he revealed his wealth. Nate, she said slowly, I think I know who's behind this. What? Who? Nate demanded, his voice tense. Kim took a steadying breath. My ex-husband, Ryland. He has more money and influence than I ever realized. And he's not exactly the forgiving type. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Nate finally spoke, his tone was low and dangerous. You're telling me this now? After everything's already gone to hell? Jesus Christ, Kim? What else haven't you told me? The line went dead. Kim stared at the phone in her hand, tears filling her eyes. How had everything gone so wrong? Days passed, and their situation only worsened. Bill collectors called non-stop, and their refrigerator was often empty. Kim found herself doing something she'd never thought she'd have to do again, scanning the want ads for any job that would take her. One evening, as she sat at their small kitchen table, circling job leads in the newspaper, Nate stormed in, his clothes disheveled and eyes frantic. Pack your bags, he barked, heading for the bedroom. Kim leapt up, following him. What? Nate, what's going on? He was throwing clothes into a suitcase haphazardly. We're leaving tonight. I've got a lead on a fresh start in LA. An old friend says he can set us up. Kim's heart raced. Leave. But what about our life here? Our friends, Nate spun around, fury in his eyes. What friends, Kim? What life? It's all gone, thanks to you and your rich ex-husband. Kim flinched as though she'd been struck. That's not fair. I didn't know. You should have known, Nate roared. You were married to the guy. God, I thought I'd hit the jackpot with you, but instead I'm stuck with a clueless gold digger who couldn't even pick the right mark. His words hung in the air, harsh and unforgiving. Something inside Kim snapped. Is that all I am to you? She asked quietly, her voice edged with steel. A meal ticket. Nate's anger deflated slightly as he ran a hand through his hair. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I'm just scared, Kim. Everything's falling apart, and I don't know how to fix it. Kim looked at him, really looked at him. The confident, charming man she had fallen for was gone. In his place stood someone desperate and broken. She made her decision. Go, she said softly. Nate blinked. What? Go to LA. Make your fresh start. But I'm not coming with you. Don't be stupid, Kim, Nate pleaded. We're in this together. For better or worse, remember. Kim shook her head, a sad smile on her face. No, Nate. We never were in this together. We were just two people using each other to get what we thought we wanted. But it's time to face the truth. This us, it's over. Nate stared at her for a long moment, then silently zipped up his suitcase and walked out the door. Kim listened as his footsteps echoed down the hall, waited until she heard the elevator doors close, and then, in the quiet of the apartment, she finally let herself cry. Weeks passed, and Kim threw herself into job hunting with a desperation born from necessity. She swallowed her pride and accepted a job as a receptionist at a small real estate office, a far cry from her dreams of becoming a top agent, but it was something. She downsized further, moving into a tiny studio apartment in a less desirable part of town. Every day was a struggle, but slowly she began to rebuild. One afternoon, as she was walking home from work, she saw a familiar figure stepping out of a high-end restaurant. It was Ryland, looking sharp in a tailored suit, laughing with a group of executives. On his arm was a woman Kim didn't recognize, pretty in a simple, understated way, her smile warm as she looked up at Ryland. Kim felt a pang not of jealousy, but of regret for what might have been. She watched as Ryland helped the woman into a waiting car, his hand lingering gently on her back. He looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way Kim realized she had never seen before. Before she could stop herself, Kim called out Ryland. He turned, his eyes scanning the street, until they landed on her. The warmth in his expression immediately cooled. Kim, he said, his voice neutral. This is unexpected. Kim approached cautiously, suddenly all too aware of her worn work clothes and scuffed shoes. I saw you and thought I'd say hello. How are you?" Ryland raised an eyebrow slightly. "I'm doing well. Very well, actually. And you?" Kim forced a smile. "Oh, just getting by. Starting over." Ryland nodded, his face unreadable. "I heard about Nate's business troubles. That's unfortunate." The lack of sincerity in his voice stung, and Kim couldn't hold back her question. "Did you have something to do with that?" Ryland's smile turned cold. "The tech world can be ruthless, Kim. Nate should have known better than to play a game he wasn't equipped for." "You ruined us," Kim hissed. "Was this your plan all along? To watch us fall apart?" Ryland remained calm. "I didn't ruin anyone. I just let the consequences of your choices play out. You wanted excitement and glamour, Kim. Well, this is where that path led." Kim felt tears pricking her eyes. "I made a mistake, I know that now. I'm sorry. For everything." For a moment something flickered in Ryland's eyes, a trace of the man she had once known. But it vanished quickly, replaced by indifference. "Apology accepted," he said flatly, "but it doesn't change anything. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it, just like I had to live with mine." "Ryland, please," Kim begged, her voice breaking. "I'm struggling. I just need a little help to get back on my feet." Ryland's laugh was hollow. "Help? From me? I'm not your safety net, Kim. I'm not your second option. I'm nothing to you anymore, and that's exactly how I want it to stay." He turned to leave but paused, glancing back. "One piece of advice: stop waiting for someone else to solve your problems. Stand on your own for once. It might actually do you some good." With that, Ryland walked away, leaving Kim standing on the sidewalk, the gap between their lives never more obvious. Back at home, Ryland found Chloe waiting for him, concern etched on her face. "I saw you talking to Kim," she said softly. "Are you okay?" Ryland sank onto the couch beside her, feeling drained. "Yeah, I'm fine." It was strange seeing her like that. Chloe took his hand. "Do you regret it? What you did to Nate's company?" Ryland sat in silence for a moment, then shook his head. "No, they made their choices, and I just made sure those choices had consequences." "And now?" Chloe asked gently. "Is it over?" Ryland looked at her, really looked at her, saw the concern in her eyes, but also the love and understanding. "Yes," he said firmly. "It's over. Kim, Nate, all of it. That's the past. You and what we're building together, that's my future." Chloe smiled and leaned in to kiss him softly. "Good, because I have some news." Ryland raised an eyebrow. "Oh!" Chloe grinned. "Remember that socially responsible tech project we've been working on? Well, I just got word we secured full funding. We're officially launching." A genuine smile spread across Ryland's face. This was what mattered. Not revenge, not old wounds, but creating something meaningful. Something that could truly make a difference. "Partner," he said, pulling Chloe close. "Looks like we've got work to do." As they leaned over Chloe's laptop, excitedly discussing plans for their new venture, Ryland felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. He had walked through fire, faced his demons, and come out stronger on the other side. Kim, Nate, and all the pain of the past faded into irrelevance compared to the bright future he was building with Chloe. He had learned his lesson, paid his dues, and now it was time to truly live. Epilogue. Oh, book. Months later, Ryland sat in his home office, sipping coffee as he browsed the morning news. A small item caught his eye: a foreclosure notice on a rundown apartment. The name listed Kimberly Bowers Cole. For a moment, Ryland's finger hovered over the trackpad, tempted to learn more. But then he heard Chloe's laughter from the kitchen, smelled breakfast cooking, and realized he didn't care. Not anymore. He closed the browser and stood, stretching. It was a beautiful day, full of possibility, and he had much better things to do than dwell on the past. As he joined Chloe in the kitchen, pulling her into a warm embrace, Ryland knew with absolute certainty he had made the right choice. This was his second chance, his fresh start, and he wasn't going to waste a single moment of it.